So I've made a couple videos about the wood stove in the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, and both of them have done really well. And there's been a lot of comments in the comment section and discussions, a lot of good stuff. So I thought I'd do another video. We're coming up on winter. I figure I got maybe another month and a half, and I'm gonna have to light this up probably late October. This is mid-September now. The discussion that I was talking about before is how this stove works, and if we don't use this stove correctly, governments are going to ban these wood stoves. These wood stoves today, new technologies, and I'm going to explain all this here in a bit, are already over-regulated, just massively bad. The thing is if you use these things correctly, they put out a fantastic amount of heat. It's incredible how well these work. I mean, a lot better than what I remember growing up. You will use less firewood if you use it correctly, which is important because firewood is just a lot of work. So we talked about the federal government and governments banning these. And what it is I think around 2010s, somewhere around there, the EPA came out and said, we're regulating wood stoves. And you're only allowed so many parts per million of whatever toxin they were worried about that could come out of your chimney. So a lot of wood stove companies immediately went out of business because they just couldn't afford to make the changes. There were some that were able to make the changes pretty well. And so this particular wood stove is already a few years old, and it's 85% efficient, which means it burns everything you put in it. Most of your older wood stoves lose a lot of its efficiency through the smoke. What smoke is unburned particles of wood. And so for this particular wood stove, it has these air tubes in here, and it sucks airs in. These tubes get super hot, and when the smoke hits that air tube, with the combination of the air coming in the air tube, you might be able to see, I don't know, but these tubes here have holes in them, and those holes bring fresh air from outside, which is, I got an intake on the back side of the stove coming from outside, and it sucks that air, and the smoke just burst into flames, blue flames, very pretty. Puts you right to sleep watching that dancing flame up there at the ceiling of the wood stove. All that smoke being burned means you don't have any smoke coming out of the chimney. The second advantage of using these is you don't get creosote built up in the chimney. And creosote will cause chimney fires. So your insurance companies don't want you to use wood stoves because of the chimney fires. But municipalities don't want you using wood stoves for the same two reasons. They don't like the smoke coming out of the chimney, and they don't like the fires in the house, because then the fire department has to come out. So many municipalities will ban this. As a matter of fact, we had these comments in the videos, and many people said, I don't want it in my town. The smoke comes out, it stinks, terrible. It's neat watching this wood stove. You don't see the smoke. On really cold days, what you actually see coming out of the chimney is steam, because that hot fumes coming out of the chimney hits the cold air outside and it turns into steam. It makes that condensation in the air just turn to steam. It's kind of neat, but it's not smoke. But the key to making all this work is you got to have dry firewood. When I mean dry, I don't mean that it got rained on. I mean that when you take a moisture tester, and you can buy moisture testers on Amazon, wood moisture testers, they're about 20 to 30 bucks. And you split your firewood, and then you take the tube probes. I wish I'd have brought it over here, but I didn't. I've showed you in previous videos. As a matter of fact, at the up next box at the end of this video, I'll link that other video where we talk about moisture testers. And you test it, and it should be below 20%. Well, actually 20% or below. So the first year we were here, we didn't have any dry firewood. It was just impossible. I couldn't hire anybody to bring dry firewood. Everything was well into the 20s and 30s. So we had really no choice but to burn wet firewood. And this stove was terrible, absolutely terrible. I hated it. Carolyn hated it. We had 2 chimney fires. And Carolyn came up with the suggestion of just taking all this efficiency stuff out of it and let it run like an old wood stove, which many people in the comment section says that's what you're supposed to do. These new wood stoves just don't work. The problem is you take it apart, and now all that smoke's coming out of the chimney. And so if you're in town, your neighbor just called you in. And they said, hey, John next door pumping all this wood smoke into my house and it's causing my asthma to flare up. And so the next town meeting, they come up and say, okay, no more wood stoves. So you can install wood stoves into your new homes, or if you have an existing home that doesn't have a wood stove, you won't be able to install it there. And so many people in the comment section, yeah, my town won't let me have a wood stove and I'm going to have to move out to the country and I can't afford a piece of property. So these folks who came into my comment section and said, they can't ban wood stoves. What are we going to heat with? That's illegal. They're going to take away my human rights of warmth. Yeah, they will. A lot of people said, I don't care what the government says. I'm going to run the wood stove the way I want to run my wood stove. But now they're not going to sell wood stoves anymore because you refuse to run the wood stove the way they want you to run it. The next person who wants to buy a wood stove is suffering because you chose not to run the wood stove the way it's supposed to be ran. And the folks in town can't run wood stoves anymore either. I mean, and that's pretty common. I can't remember any town that I lived in that would allow you to run wood stoves. I lived in an old, they call it a village, it had 100 people. And our neighbor had a wood stove. It was an outdoor wood furnace. He had one. But if I recall, I think he was even shut down. I think the town came in and said they couldn't run it. He was pumping it into a mobile home. In the comment section, it really varies on, I guess, where you were raised. But in the comment section, there was definitely a divide. There was them that said, oh, I don't care what the law says, I'm going to do whatever I want. And then we had those that said, well, I don't want a wood stove running in my town, choking me out. One of the comments that I got was, I have a firewood too close to the wood stove, it's going to catch on fire. Don't you see, you can't do that? And it was. In the last video, I had it stacked way up and it was leaning up against the wood stove. Well, I just wanted to point out to everybody that I don't have a fire. So, there's that. But secondly, it's not as dangerous as what everybody makes it out to be. There really is very little heat. It gets these logs too hot. We have a tiny house and I've been doing this will be the 3rd year, so it's okay. Now, what's really interesting, the first year we were here, a lot of people said, put your firewood on top of the stove when it's on and it will dry out and you won't have to worry about a thing. And when we did that, the wood actually did catch on fire. It's interesting how people think. They want you to put your firewood away from the wood stove because it's going to catch on fire, but then they want you to put the wood on the wood stove to dry it out. Really makes no sense. Now, one of the things that was brought up many times, and I thought I covered this pretty thoroughly in the video, was these wood stoves are hard to light. Well, it's not true. They're very easy to light. It takes me all of 2 minutes to light a wood stove. What I do is I stack the wood stove. I'm going to call this east and west, and in and out there, north and south. So what you do is you stack, if I had small enough pieces, you'd stack 2 pieces north and south, and then 2 pieces east and west. Now I take a little Sawzall that I got, a little battery operated thing, and I cut these to length. And so you run 2 across, and then you run another 2 north and south. And then you put some bark. Of course, I would break all this up, and I'd sit it right in the center. I take my blowtorch, and within 2 minutes, I have a nice roaring fire. When you're running wet firewood, then yeah, even in the old wood stoves, wet firewood was hard to start, and you always had to have one of these things. You would want wet firewood. I've heard this many times all through my life. You want wet firewood at night, so you have coals in the morning, so you can use this thing to try to get your next set of logs to catch fire. And you're sitting there and you're pumping this billow thing. It blows air, in case you've never seen one. You just pump it. It's hard to do with one hand. And that blows air in there. And it takes about 15 to 20 minutes to really get a good roaring fire in there. I demonstrated that last year. So in my mind, just having dry firewood is a lot easier. The problem with dry firewood is you have to plan ahead. And I think that's where a lot of people fall down, is they don't plan ahead. Just like I didn't plan ahead that first year. I mean, I tried, but there was just no way to do it. Move in and have a wood stove. But if we plan ahead and you get firewood now, and then in 2 years, if you use oak, you can have a nice roaring fire with dry oak firewood. Now, if you use something like sycamore or walnut, something that's not such a hard wood, you could have dry firewood within 6 months. That dries pretty quick. As a matter of fact, last year we were kind of struggling still getting dry firewood. I mean, this year we're going to be fine because it's been well into 2 years. But the last year, it was only a year. And so I was going out, checking every piece to make sure they were all dry. Some weren't, some were. But the sycamore and walnut, which I had quite a bit of, got me through about half the season. Now, a lot of people say this wood stove's too big. I bought this on Facebook Marketplace for 450 bucks. It had only been used once. Now, people are going to ask what the brand name is. It's already discontinued. But if you go to Home Depot, you can find wood stoves just like this. And they're about $1,280. So, I mean, I saved a significant amount of money buying it used. People say it's too big for this little tiny house. Well, you just downsize the logs. Like I said, I'm going to cut these in half. I'm going to split them some more. It's not about the size of the wood stove. It's about the size of the log you're putting in it. How much wood you're putting in it. This will keep this house warm for about 8 hours. So we're really not utilizing a lot of firewood. Now another key about using dry firewood is when your flame hits that wet moisture inside the log, the flame goes out. And so what happens is now you have this big black piece of coal, what people call ash, that is remaining. That is firewood. So you're scooping that stuff up, throwing it away, but you should be burning that. So if you use dry firewood, you never have those black clumps of coal anymore. Now, another thing we discussed was the metal behind the wall. We just bought this metal at Home Depot, and I think they were $9 a sheet. Now, the thing is they have little spacers in it. You'll see a spacer. These are designed by I think it's Red Devil. I forget the name brand. But these are designed by a company that designs things for wood stoves. And so that gives us like an inch space. They actually say that you have to use metal if you're not going to use fireproof drywall. So we use pallet wood for our walls, you know, for a cabiny look type of thing. So when you put your hand behind this, it is absolutely cool to the touch on the wall. Even though this gets pretty hot, and no, it doesn't get red hot, but you can touch it. But behind it, the wood is absolutely cool. A lot of people say, no, you're supposed to use fire brick behind there. That way it doesn't transfer. You can't use fire brick because fire brick actually is not a very good insulator. It kind of just runs right through it. Unless you have that fireproof drywall, you can't use fire brick. If you follow the instructions in the book when you buy your wood stove, it tells you everything you need to know. If we don't start following the rules, they are going to get rid of these. It's inevitable. So if you'll click this up next box, it'll take you to that video where we talk about moisture testers and different things. So I hope I can inspire you to use it efficiently so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.